The ISIS vision is to achieve 100% renewable energy for all, used efficiently and wisely. We represent a diverse membership of academics, researchers, energy practitioners, consultants, students, businesses and advocates. ISIS works together with like-minded organizations from countries around the world to advance the renewable energy transformation. You can also support the work we do by becoming a member of ISIS, and in that way you are supporting the 100% renewable energy movement. For more details, please visit our website ises.org and join.ises.org. The presentations and recording of this webinar will be available for 24 hours on the ISIS website. After that time, we will post them to the ISIS members area. If you are a member of ISIS, log in and click on Members area in the top level menu, and you will already see the library of our past webinars from this year and from last year, and also 2014. If you are not a member, please visit our membership page, and we encourage you to have a look at the different membership services and benefits and sign up. So that's join.isis.org. You are welcome and encouraged to ask questions at any time throughout the webinar. To ask a question, select the Questions pane on your screen and type in your question. Please remember to specify who your question is directed to. Questions will be addressed after all the presentations in a Q&A session. We would also like to encourage you to use the ISIS discussion forum on LinkedIn to continue the Q&A session. Through sponsorships, donations and also the support of ISIS members, we can continue hosting these free webinars. For more information about becoming a member or sponsoring a webinar, please visit our website isis.org or get in touch with us via email. Our moderator for this webinar is Anna Leitreiter. She is Senior Program Manager for Climate Energy, carrying out policy research and developing advocacy campaigns with the Climate Energy team at the World Future Council. In her main capacity, Anna works on enabling policy frameworks for a global energy transition towards 100% renewable energies and is the campaign coordinator for Global 100% RE campaign. She is also a member of the ISIS Board of Directors. So, Anna, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Jana. Thanks for bringing us all together, and thank you in particular to ISIS for hosting that and bringing this important platform to so many people across the world in so many corners. I always find webinars a very effective way of engaging and sharing, even though it's very unpersonal and it's really difficult to talk in front of a screen knowing that there are so many people out there in so many different realities listening. So I'm actually very much looking forward to seeing lots of questions in the question box being posted along the next 1.5 hours, so we can make sure that we can really, you can benefit from it and we can meet your needs and your interest. So please, everyone, feel free to engage and make sure that we know who you are so we can tailor our discussion accordingly. As Joanna already introduced me, I have the pleasure to moderate this webinar on behalf of the Global 100% Renewable Energy campaign, which I'm a coordinator of. And we have great panelists with us today. My colleague Irene Garcia, she works with me in the World Future Council and is currently specifically working on bringing 100% renewable energy to Morocco. So she will share a little bit more insights on how a country like Morocco can be even more of a pioneer than they are already in the renewables sphere and move towards 100% renewables. Secondly, we will hear from Sixbert Mwanga, who I have the pleasure of working with for a long time already, specifically on 100% renewable energy in Tanzania. And Sixbert is currently in his home country and will share with us the work that he and his colleagues and his great organization CAN Tanzania is doing in the East African country. And lastly, we have Toby Couture. Toby is the founder of E3 Analytics, and he will share with us some of the insights of a brand new report that Toby has actually just published together with us in the World Future Council, but also with a partner organization, HEBUS, on sustainable cooking. And in that presentation, we will learn more how renewable energy can actually be used in the cooking sector as well. So the next 1.5 hours will be very insightful conversations about different aspects, different parts of the world and different realities on how renewable energy can be and is already a reality in developing countries. As I said before, I would very much like to encourage you to engage and to join this movement that's happening around the world. The Global 100% Renewable Energy Campaign is a platform where this can take place. The organizations involved in this webinar are all partners of this campaign, and together we want to build the movement. And I want to encourage you all to log into Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn and find us, and also engage during this conversation now, during the webinar, via hashtag Go100RE on Twitter. Make sure that these words are even among more people than those logging into this webinar. I want to give just a very brief introduction to the topic to bring everyone on the same page, and I want to start with some good news. Some of you might have heard there was the COP22, the UN Climate Conference, just taking place in Marrakesh in Morocco, and the end of this COP was again a very uplifting moment, as we've not as uplifting as last year in Paris, where it was where we agreed the Paris Agreement and have for the first time in history a very strong climate agreement among all countries to limit global warming to hopefully 1.5 degrees Celsius. This year in Marrakesh, we actually saw great leadership, in particularly from developing countries, and especially from 48 countries that are all collaborating in the Climate Vulnerable Forum. And you see a list of these countries in front of you in this slide, where these 48 countries have actually committed in a so-called Marrakesh vision on the last day of the COP to produce 100% renewable energy domestically while working on energy poverty and tackling climate change, boosting development, ensuring food and water security. So this very strong declaration was a great hope at the end of the climate conference, and two of the countries are Tanzania and Morocco, and we will hear more about both of these countries in more depth from our experts on the panel. Where are we with regards to renewable energy globally? What are we actually talking about? We have a few numbers for you to just understand kind of the scope of this conversation. We have the latest numbers from the Global Status Report, which is annually launched by the multi-stakeholder platform REN21 from 2016. They say that in 2014 we had almost 20% renewable energy. So in the global final energy consumption we had about almost 20% renewables. out of which only half is modern renewables, and the other half, or a bit less than half, is traditional biomass, which is, as you all know, mostly coming from developing countries, which is, for example, wood fuel and cow dung. So this is where we are, and modern renewables, including solar, wind technologies, some hydropower, geothermal, biofuels. This is only 10.3% in the global energy consumption. So there's lots to work on. We indeed have a massive increase in global investments in renewable power in particularly, and this is happening around the world, as you can see in this graph. Last year we had 286 billion US dollars invested in renewable energy, which is more than combined fossil fuels are invested in. So this is actually very encouraging. And you see in this graph as well that the blue bar in the year 2015 was higher than the yellow bar, which basically means that the investments were made particularly in developing countries. We all know that for an uptake of renewable energy, policies are crucial. Without the right policy framework, we're not getting anywhere. And this is why I want to show you this slide, in which you can see an overview of all countries in the world having some kind of a renewable energy policy. So this includes different measures, as you can see, and the different colors are indicating the different sectors. So the blue one is the power sector, showing that most renewable energy policies are actually addressing the power sector. Whereas you can see that the heating, cooling, and the transport sector do not have that many policies yet, and also the development over the years from 2012 to 2015 have not been that much of a difference. So this shows that there is a real concern that we need to do much more to actually achieve our goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees by enhancing renewable energy policies in the transport, heating, and cooling sector. The costs of renewable energy have been dropping massively. Some of you might have heard different numbers, and these graphs are all usually very complicated, but the message behind it is the levelized cost of electricity is comparable or competitive with fossil fuel power generation. You can see these dots because obviously each technology's costs differ across the world with different scales. The size of these dots give you an idea of the capacity in megawatt. So you actually see that especially solar and wind technologies are very cost competitive with conventional power generation. And this helps in particular developing countries to have a big, massive uptake. And while this uptake is taking place, renewable energy also creates jobs. We have a huge employment increase in the sector, especially in countries like China, Brazil, United States. And this is something that all the panelists will probably come back on that later as well, because creating jobs is one of the most important policy priorities that every country and every policymaker has. So the transition to renewable energy must be a tool to create jobs. And finally, another map to show you the very encouraging picture. There are pioneers, actually jurisdictions on all governance levels around the world, that have 100% renewable energy targets, and some of them are actually achieving them already. And these pioneers are mainly on the local and regional level, so we have communities, cities, islands that are really massively providing massive leadership and also learnings for others to see how can we actually make this transition in a very just, affordable, and fair manner. So I encourage all of you to look at these case studies. You find this on the Global 100% campaign website, and you can explore these different case studies and cities and how have they done it, and hopefully you can help us to gather more of these examples, as this is data that is usually available very locally. So we rely on all of your input to find these case studies, and this is what the Global 100% Renewable Energy campaign tries to do. So I hope I will get lots of messages from all of you around the world in my inboxes with more examples. And this brings me to hand over to my colleague Irene Garcia from the World Future Council, who will now share with us some of the insights on how Morocco, as a Northern African, as an Arab country, can boost development with transitioning to 100% renewable energy. You find Irene on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, so feel free to engage with her after the webinar as well. And Irene, over to you.
Irene, you could...
Thank you very much. Anna?
As Anna Ladreite has effectively unfortunate growing number of governments worldwide which are setting renewable energy goals to help meet energy needs, while at the same time fueling economic growth and fighting climate change. Morocco is one of the signatories of the Climate Forum, which has committed to achieve 100% domestic renewable energy production as soon as possible. And in fact, aware of the nation's energy stakes and the promising future of renewable energy needs, in 2009, the country presented a new national energy strategy to 2030 to take up these challenges. And the strategy aims specifically to strengthen security of supply, energy availability, as well as generalize access at reasonable cost. And accordingly, as we can see in this chart, the country set the goal to increase the share of renewables to 42% of total installed capacity in the electricity sector by 2020. And during COP21, the Kingdom announced its commitment to reach a rate of renewable energy penetration of 52% of total installed capacity by 2030. And as we can see in the chart, in the contribution of renewable energies is clearly increasing over time, particularly the share of solar and wind. These targets are anchored in a three-pronged strategy developed by the government to liberalize and boost the renewable energy sector. And they consist first in the setting of a legal framework, notably Law 1309, which so far has delivered major achievements in the country, such as the opening of the production of electricity from renewable energy sources to competition, the granting of access to renewable energy sources to the electricity network, and the right to export electricity from renewable energy sources. Second, the government established dedicated institutions to take up the challenges of the energy transition, such as MECEN, ADRE, or IRESEN. And finally, the third pillar is the subsidies reform. In 2013, the country took steps to reform the fossil fuel subsidy system, which was costing the nation 5% of GDP, or 3.7 billion euros, as again nearly nothing in 2003. a decade ago. Since December 2015, the prices of fuels have obeyed to the free play of supply and demand, and currently the government is studying the reform of the butane subsidy. So far, the remodeling of this legal, institutional, and financial framework has helped achieve impressive results in the diversified portfolio of renewable energy projects which are taking place in Morocco. One of the well-known examples is Noor Warzazat, the first mega solar project launched by Masen, which will reach a total capacity of 580 megawatts by 2018. And it will bring power to 1.1 million people. This first phase of the project has generated already 2,000 jobs, of which 40% in the region, especially in the construction and public works sectors. And also we can see the Tarfaya Wind Park, which is making the news. It will supply 1.5 million households, and it's become Africa's largest wind energy projects. It has achieved an industrial integration of 70% and is contributed to the creation of new broad installations and equipment in the area. And overall, as we can see here, the solar projects will save $500 million, the wind project at around $750 million, and according to a study of the Ministry of Energy in 2013, it will create at around 50,000 jobs by 2020 with the whole renewable energy projects. This is very good news because particularly if we consider that despite the socioeconomic progress that the country has made in the previous decade, Morocco still faces high challenges such as an unemployment rate of 22% for university graduates, an economy which is concentrated on non-exportable service and a trade deficit of 6% of GDP. So renewable energies are helping the country to boost economic growth and is seen as a vector for socioeconomic development. Nevertheless, Morocco can and must go farther and faster to meet this 100% renewable energy vision, which the country has endorsed at COP22. And this is needed to first cope with the growing electricity demand, which is increasing at an annual rate of 6.6% over the last 10 years. To end fossil fuel dependency, currently the country keeps importing 95% of its energy consumption, which represented about 10 to 12% of the GDP. To fight climate change, because the forecasts see a temperature increase of 0.5 to 1% by 2020 and by 1 to 1.5% by 2050 and 2080. And finally, to capitalize its renewable energy potential, solar resources, according to its studies made by the government, are equivalent to 20,000 megawatts, and wind potential likewise. So the good news is that wind and solar energy projects are already very cost competitive in Morocco, along the lines that Anna highlighted in her presentation. If we see, for example, the integrated green projects, they secure a price of $0.03 US, and the solar, the move was at $0.14 US, which surpassed any expectation any energy stakeholders in Morocco had, according to what the different stakeholders have highlighted at both COP21 and COP22. And if we compare to the price the government paid by fossil fuels over the last decade for the wind project, for example, is three times cheaper. So how can Morocco unlock the full potential of renewables and achieve this pledge of going 100% renewable energy? The World Future Council has been engaging over the last couple of years with the renewable energy stakeholders in the country, parliamentarians, policymakers, experts, academia, and civil society. And a summary of the different discussions and hearings, it's been the creation of a roadmap to 100% renewable energy, which includes 4 key pillars: a political pillar, economic, technical, and cultural one. The political pillar is pressed and needs to go 100% renewable energy system, which the country has already done. But this is the first. This is the first step. The energy transition is an evolving process and much more complex. And to accompany and make this goal become true, it's important that the country first favor the emergence of local projects. And this implies reaffirming the role which stakeholders must play at the local level, favor a decentralized approach to energy policies, and develop simple and efficient administrative procedures. Secondly, it's keep the country formulate transparent, non-discriminatory, and stable directives for access to the network, with great priority access for renewables, setting conditions and modalities to the low voltage grid, and mechanism for equitable sharing of costs between the electricity producer and operator, and defining the tariff conditions for electricity into the network. And third is key that the country ensure participation of self-producers in the renewable energy-based electricity production. So far as the current legal framework is, the self-producers' titles is not recognized. And finally, it's key that the country build horizontal and vertical alliance with renewable energy stakeholders and not only a top-down process. The second pillar is the economic pillar. We've seen that the energy transition can become a factor of national economic development and deliver for local development in the country. But to ensure sustainable prosperity over the long term, Morocco must embed this 100% renewable energy strategy into a national economic development plan. And there are key actions that the country, according to Morocco stakeholders, could need to incorporate to realize these ambitions. The first one is to support the involvement of small and medium-sized renewable energy projects in the energy transition, and not only large-scale projects through auctioning process as it's done so far. And this could imply offering financial support for small and medium-sized renewable energy projects and loans specifically dedicated to renewable energy with preferential terms as regard interest rates and reimbursement duration will favor the accessibility to these small and medium-sized renewable energy projects. Secondly, it could be important that the country put in place measures in size and investment in renewable energy. In this direction, suppression of the added value tax could be very much welcome. And thirdly, the country needs to open the renewable energy market to competition and ensuring a transparent and non-discriminatory grid access for all the users, but also providing the free choice of supplier by consumers as well as for the right of producers to create distribution networks. And finally, there is a need to set a limit on every type of fossil fuel subsidies and to put in place mechanisms to compensate the elimination of fossil fuel energy subsidies, and especially for butane. In this regard, if the country accelerated the implementation of a program to equip housing and the tertiary sector with solar water heaters and PV irrigation pumping program, this will have the elimination of the butane subsidy. The third pillar is a technical one. Given the growing power demand, especially at peak periods, and the variations in energy flows and other disturbances, if the country is heading towards 100% renewable energy, it needs to integrate renewable energy productions on a large scale. This implies first and foremost to extend and improve grid infrastructure, defining a concrete vision of the electricity production and demand. For example, if Morocco could reorient the development of large thermodynamic solar plants for priority coverage of consumption peaks after sunset and assign PVs to the daily production of electricity. And second, the country would need to balance the variable share of renewable energies, and this implies improving forecasting and planning method, embracing smart grids, and foreseeing smart metering systems. Thirdly, it's important to extend renewable energies to the heating, cooling, and transport sector. So far, the country has only been targeting the electricity sector and only the installed capacity, but the transport sector is responsible for 40% of the energy consumption in the country. And finally, it's key to strengthen renewable energy expertise and technical training. And for this, increasing the financial efforts on R&D and research and development, which currently represents less than 1% of GDP, is key, as well as in involving the university in the renewable energy projects and linking university with the private sector. And the last pillar, the cultural one, implies designing a strategy enabling society to take renewable energy into account, to let them participate, be active actors, and also benefit from this transition. This implies strengthening the understanding of what going towards 100% renewable energy mean on every stakeholders, not only citizens but local authorities as well. They are the key actors, and every project taking place in the project will need the help and accompanying of these of local authorities. Secondly, it's key to develop a social dimension within the energy transition, which means it's forcing the mechanisms for citizens to participate in the design of the process and to see how can they benefit and cooperate with the implementation of the projects. And thirdly, provide awareness-raising campaigns, and this is directly linked to education programs and to highlight the benefits that renewable energies are already providing in the country. But I'm glad to go more into the details in the question and answer. Thank you very much. Also, if you want to read the report, they are here in the presentation, the link both in the English and the French version. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Irene, for sharing this wealth of information with us, and I'm sure people have lots of questions. So please feel free to post your questions in the question box. I see them, and we'll make sure that we can incorporate that after the next two presentations when we go into the question and answers. So thank you for that, for sharing, and there's lots of information online. You can see that in the links that also are provided in your presentation, Irene. And for the next, we stay on the same continent. We stay in Africa, but we move a bit east to the eastern coast of the continent. We go to Tanzania, where Sixbert Mwanga is the coordinator of the Climate Action Network Tanzania, and where he is sharing with us now a little bit more about the situation in the country, but also to the work that he and his colleagues are doing to help the country to move towards 100% renewable energy. Sixbert, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you very much to Joanne, who have put a lot of effort to organize this very important webinar.
I can't hear you. I'm not sure if you're speaking already.
Yeah, I have started. Can you hear me?
See your slides, but we can't hear you.
Yes, I can hear you, Sixbert.
Joanna, do you know how we can help him?
Yes, I can hear him.
Yes.
Go ahead, Sixbert. I think Anna's microphone is cut off. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I just wanted to start by showing this on this this map. As you can see, I just wanted to start with showing the current energy situation in the country. So we have the first thing is the availability, the abundance of energy sources, especially in the renewable sources, which includes the wind, the solar, and a lot of course, untapped biomass. And then a very important point is that despite the abundance, the country depends heavily on the imported energy, fossil fuel, so to speak. And of recently, more than 45% of electricity generation depend primarily on hydro, and 36 goes to the natural gas, and then the 19% goes to other thermal. However, within the same line, the drought, the losses of electricity, and the corruption window have seriously affected the energy, especially electricity generation within the country. So that was on the issue of energy security. So on energy equity, as I said, the high petroleum import and the electricity costs are very much significant and affect significantly the national GDP. And the bad thing is that most of the electricity connections are always connected to the, always directed to the town, and they sometimes are always unaffordable because of the high cost. And most of these also, as I said, as you can see already, they are not community owned. And the 24 is the access to the national grid, which does not mean that access is always means, does not mean availability always. A very important point to consider is that with more than 50 million of the population in Tanzania, 80% is, lives in the rural area, and the majority are really poor. So this means that if the issue of energy is focused on town, that means a limited number of huge population is always left out without electricity or affordable and clean energy. On the environment, with regard to the current energy situation in the country, of course we have the low carbon emissions if we are to compare with other countries. However, there has been an increasing demand for energy of more than 10% per year. And the question remains whether this demand has some contribution or has a potential to maintain the carbon footprint. Again, more than 90% of energy mix, especially in the rural areas, depends highly on biomass, and this results to deforestation. So if you again go to the just a bit down of that map, then as I said, I talked about the 24%, and then of recently, only 10% of the 80% in the rural areas are connected to the national grid, which does not mean always that they have access to the national grid, to the electricity because of the drought, losses, and the corruption we have mentioned earlier before. And the current installation and the generation capacity stands to 1308 megawatts. Of course, the demand goes beyond that. Yeah. So, and then the current energy hustle in this country, if you again, which is related to what I have said, one is that I have mentioned the 50 million people who are living in this country. But one needs to be reminded that 80% of this population lives in the rural area, and they spend of these people, they depend on biomass up to 90%. And that, as I mentioned, this leads to high deforestation and degradation. So you can see the woman with a small young man carrying the firewood from the forest. And this has a lot of implications, as we will see in the future when it comes to the time devoted for other economic, socio-economic development, and again related to such young boy attending his studies. But again, as you can see, the 3 stones with the then as these are the kind of available energy sources, especially in the rural areas. And then on the right, again, you will see the people who are like cooking, and then you can see a lot of smokes, and you can already see the firewood they are using. And then this sends an implication on where these rocks comes from when it comes to deforestation and something of that kind. So 100% renewable energy and poverty reduction. Here I have just developed this. I just wanted to share with you this kind of drawing, which has a lot of meaning when it comes to poverty reduction. I just wanted to start by saying that it has been unfortunate that the issue of energy in this country or in most of the developing countries, especially in the East African region, has been treated in isolation of other sectors, including, let's say, the human development, the poverty reduction strategies, and some agriculture and something of that kind. So if you look, as I said, if we go to 100% renewable energy, then we need to tap the renewable energy sources, whether wind, solar, and the others, just to mention a few. And then you go down, then this will result to the access to clean, affordable, and reliable energy services. Please be reminded that this has a lot of focus in the rural areas rather than towns, because the towns is already favored, so we need to think of the rural areas where the majority lives, and if at all we are to improve or to reduce poverty among the rural people. So then again down, then we have, as I said, if there is increased access to clean, affordable, and reliable energy services, then that on the right is actually improved education. Then you won't see the picture, you won't see the little boy going to fetch or to find firewood and then suspend going at the expense of going to school. But of interest again, there will be, or this has resulted to the increase of jobs, especially in the rural areas, which has a lot of meaning, so to speak. One is the jobs that most of the youngs who get graduated in towns, they are likely and they are very happy even to suspend being employed in the rural areas, because with the simple reason that in the rural areas they won't be able to charge their phones, iron their clothes, look smart, and they communicate with their parents in different localities of this country. So, but with access to clean energy and affordable, then we result to the jobs, and the jobs specifically, which could be sometimes indirectly within the rural areas. But jobs again to the people who are attending technical colleges and the schools, then they are likely to be, or they have been employed in these areas. And then this results to the income generation. So the income generation again is more related to the jobs themselves, but on how again the agricultural production could be increased or enhanced, including the irrigation, ways of storing foods, and again I'm going on my right. Then there's the issue of time saving. the time which is spent by the household members to find firewood, and then will be reduced, then people have enough time to spend on other activities or socioeconomic activities. Then they reduce the workload, and this is specifically to women, of course. This has a lot of signal with regard to the gender balance and actually creating more opportunities for women, children, and of course even men, but of important women who spend much time to look for firewood, for cooking, and take care of their families. So below the improved education, then as I said, I mentioned already, there is an increase of productivity because of education, the level of understanding of different issues, but again, of the time itself available. Then that results to the better living standards of the communities, which is also related to, as I mentioned already, time saving and then engagement in other productive activities. But again, as you have seen, the smoke which goes out has indoor related diseases and something of that kind, has a lot of, takes a lot of available labor to work in the farms or other socioeconomic activities, but again takes a lot of income from the family, because some of the money is always spent to cover the cost of only healthy related issues. Then there is increased social relations, which also again sends a lot of signal. And in this regards, we consider the households themselves, the churches which are located in the rural areas and the mosques, and then the health centers are always improved, the schools and the police and the political standards. Because on political issue, renewable energy, especially solar at household level or in the rural areas, in Tanzania has also already proved to contribute a lot, especially to promote democracy, especially during the elections. You can imagine in the areas, in the villages which are located very far from towns with no power, and then during the election, either the government needs to use part of their income to buy either torch or small solar or small lamps to use when they are counting the votes, especially during the night. You might being reminded that most of the households are such dispersed, and the people live far from one another. So to collect the votes and bring them together, then they find themselves already. So it's already night, and then they need to see how they can manage to count the votes in the night. So all of this has, in totality, has contributed to increase the social relations, and then reduces conflicts and the people saying the votes were stolen because of the darkness and something of that kind. Despite some of those good news, the country has a lot of barriers to scale up to 100 renewable energies. But what I can assure you, although we have a very long list, this does not mean that we are not making progress. That's a very important point to consider. One of these challenges is the policies are still unharmonized in different sectors. As I said, most of the, in this country, energy has been treated in isolation of other sectors. So you find different policies in different sectors are contradicting the issue of energy, especially renewable energy. So they might say the area where let's say if we were to start the community-owned solar panel, and then you have like the people to discuss. Then the police is likely to favor more such piece of land for agriculture rather than favoring that piece of land for installation of just for just a small part of installing the solar power for village electrification. Then the awareness level, and this goes beyond the understanding of the communities themselves, but the awareness level among the policymakers and decision makers is such still low. Inadequate technologies to tap existing opportunities. This is what I said. The energy, how the available technologies and the available level of understanding to tap the existing opportunities to the energy mix of this country. And then another challenge has been the poor equipment standards. Most of the equipments are imported. Of recently, there has been an increase of poor standards of equipment. This has discouraged, totally has contributed to discouragement of some of the people, especially the rural households. They buy today the solar panel, it is installed today, then but within 2-3 months it is no longer working. Why? The farmer has to sell all his or her crops he has harvested in that particular year to invest on energy, and then by the end of the time he gets a lot of loss. And then there is poor investment due to unpredictability of the central grid. This has something to do with the research. It is very important to note that in this country, as the issue of renewable energy, especially to push for 100% renewable energy is very new. Most of the scholars, I mean the academia, have not managed to do much to do research, and even the government invest a kind of funds to see where, and let the investors, especially the private sector, know when the central grid, the national grid, will be going to start to some villages. So there is a fear that today they put, when they install the solar, or some of the companies invest in solar, let's say in solar panel in a certain village, then tomorrow then they see the national grid coming in the same village. And this has actually has created bad thinking, especially to the investors, and they created a kind of fear, as I have said, because since not much money is spent for research, and then the government, or yes, responsible for energy transportation and the transmission and the even distribution of energy, they will always wait where and see how the rural communities have accepted the issue of solar renewable energy related investment, and then they see the market. Then the government also always channel or also distribute or direct the national grid to such area. Another has been the limited financial resource, especially in the flow. We don't have, as of recently, although we have created the Rural Energy Agency, we haven't managed to fundraise enough to have the well-structured department which could be doing a lot on fundraising for renewable energy issues. So the finance is within the same basket with the fossil fuel related financial resources, and then it comes to who has the interest. Remember, I have mentioned the issue of corruption, and then they will always see where they can get the people who are the politicians or the people who are still engaged in the corruption issue, which area where they can direct money, and then they follow it, or they have the window for more corruption. And then the question, there is a problem of sustainability. Because most of these investment are not, first of all, are not well owned by the local communities, because the ministry is likely to direct to say go and invest in this area, but sometimes the investment is still shaped and manipulated by the national airlines, and then the sustainability kind of is not well enhanced. So there is a lot of fear. Now, we don't, for such, as I say, this is a new area we have just entered, of course, with such a high speed, we haven't managed to create strong platform on where the issue of energy can be discussed, bringing together all relevant stakeholders, including the academia, policymakers, the civil societies, and something of that kind. And then, as I said, this could be related with what the government is doing. There is still a danger of high tension on the profit rather than favoring the human development. So instead of thinking more on human development and poverty reduction, then they are favoring more profit. As I said, I mentioned the issue of isolation and affordability. So the question which is available at the household level, especially in the rural areas, has been why we spend such money. Why should I sell my, let's say, my goat, my sheep, or my cattle to install, to, let's say, get $500 US to install a solar, and then why the people who are in the town, who are in town, they just using significant amount of money to connect to the national grid. So this has remained with a question, although of recently we have seen a significant fall of price of renewable energy related equipment and investment. This also, another question has been the income variability among households. Yes, that within the villages, households are not equal. So you find yes?
Sorry, this is Anna. You have 1 more minute. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so then I have mentioned the issue of sparse distribution of the population, which has a very nice point, which has a very nice contribution, because if they are sparse, then the government will not favor much the national grid, because it will be super expensive. Then will favor the issue of investment in the renewable energy sector. So the current actions, one is we have already started looking at renewable energy as a potential tool for poverty reduction. So that means we are trying to harmonize the sectors. And again, of recently, Tanzania and other stakeholders, including the World Future Council, we have been working to develop the renewable energy, to enhance the renewable energy platform where we bring together all stakeholders. Mainstreaming the renewable energy into national document, poverty reduction strategies, and the research agenda is already taking place. Training and engaging policy and the decision makers also taking place, and again we have created the political momentum. As a way forward, one is that we are thinking of creating a local momentum on 100% renewable energy for future development, and then ensuring the financial flows where we work with the ministries responsible for finance. To use renewable energy to ensure economic and community resilience opportunities, and creating other awareness among the stakeholders. As a conclusion, I just wanted to conclude by saying that 100% renewable energy is a robust and it should be inclusive catalyst to foster rural development in this country. And And second is that a long-term perspective and plans should be part and parcel of the process itself. 100% renewable shall be achieved quickly if all stakeholders are included. And awareness creation, as I said earlier, and as you would have said, and capacity building should be part and parcel of 100% renewable energy implementation process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sixbert, for this amazing story that you shared with us from your country, which is actually a very beautiful country, and sharing with us the encouraging news that despite the challenges, there's so much potential and so much will and lots of things happening. So I see there are already questions for Sixbert, which I will gather now and make sure that we can I can pose them to you to share some more insights. But before we go to the question and answers, I would like to ask Toby Couture from E3 Analytics to share with us some thoughts on how can we move towards sustainable cooking. And he will share some insights of a brand new study that was just launched, of which Toby is the lead author. So Toby, over to you.
Hi Anna, and hi everyone. As Anna mentioned, we've just recently, in cooperation with the World Future Council, published a report on how to achieve sustainable cooking that connects nicely with a lot of what Sixbert was saying, and I think emphasizes one of the points that Irene made, namely that we really, as a global renewable energy community, need to start thinking beyond the electricity sector and really need to start looking seriously at the use of renewable energy, scaling up renewable energy in the cooking sector, in the transport sector, and in the heating and cooling sector in particular. So our hope with this study is to make some contribution to driving that debate forward with a focus specifically on the cooking sector. So keeping in mind the time restraints and wanting to leave time for sufficient questions at the end, I'm going to move forward relatively quickly with the presentation, and then we can open it up directly to questions thereafter. So I'm currently based in Berlin, and I work a lot around the world on renewable energy policy, strategy, economic and financial issues, as well as a lot of topics in rural electrification and rural energy issues. So a quick overview of some of the regions that I've been active in recent years. So now a quick summary of the report. Again, we won't be able to get into all the nuances, but I hope to be able to give you at least a rich snapshot of some of what we've covered and some of the conclusions that we come to. So first of all, as many of you know, a lot of the efforts around the world in cooking have been focused on improved cook stoves, sort of ICS technologies. And a lot of the focus has essentially, this has dominated the agenda in recent years. It has been featured prominently among the major priorities of some of the large organizations and some of the large initiatives like SE for All. And improved cook stoves remain the main vehicle or the main sort of pathway through which finance is being invested into the cooking sector. But we argue in the report that improved cook stoves, while a step in the right direction, can never and will never be a truly long-term and truly sustainable solution to the challenge of cooking. And we base that conclusion on a few key points. First, regardless of where you look across Africa, India, Indonesia, much of the biomass that's used in cook stoves is not sustainably harvested. The second, it's often not renewable due to unsustainable rates of deforestation, issues around soil erosion and soil loss, and even in some parts, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, desertification. So once you cut the trees down, or once you cut too many branches off of the trees, you gradually lead to the death of the tree and the encroachment of desertification in regions that previously had forest cover. And that leads to a host of other implications that's likely with climate change and with changing rainfall patterns to create further problems for a host of regions where deforestation is being pursued at unsustainable rates. And this is a point I think Sixbird made quite well in his presentation from Tanzania, and Tanzania has certainly been one of the countries facing some of these issues very immediately with regard to deforestation in the cooking, driven by the cooking sector. The third point is that cooking also contributes, cooking with firewood and with charcoal in particular, also contributes to a host of other social and economic problems. So gender inequality, poor health, low child literacy, because children often spend many hours of the day gathering firewood. And this hinders economic diversification. It entrenches the existing injustices between rural and urban areas, as well as between genders, and it undermines long-term economic prosperity. So there's a host of reasons why, even if we move to improved cook stoves, we're still, and if we're still connected to a predominantly firewood or charcoal-driven cooking paradigm, then we're unlikely to ever fully address those deeper social and economic problems. And the fourth point is finally the demographics. According to the World Bank, the population of sub-Saharan Africa alone is projected to rise to almost 2.7 billion by 2060. So that's an almost tripling of the population over the next 45 years. And one of the conclusions we come to in the report is that given such a high rate of population growth, continuing to rely on firewood and charcoal, regardless of how efficient we harvest it, produce it, consume it, is going to become less and less sustainable. So that's why we need to make the transition of the cooking sector away from wood and charcoal a top global priority for the years ahead. So now let's get a quick sense of the scale of the challenge and some of the key figures that help frame the report. Currently, 93% of households in sub-Saharan Africa rely on wood or charcoal in part or in full for their daily cooking needs. So we're talking about the overwhelming majority of the population that relies either directly or indirectly on firewood or charcoal to essentially sustain their daily existence. 3 billion people around the world are still using wood or charcoal for the cooking needs. So that's almost fully half of the global population, which really underscores how far-reaching and how profound this challenge is, and also how huge the opportunity is to actually make significant progress in this area in the years ahead. According to the World Health Organization, an estimated 4.3 million people die prematurely every year because of indoor air pollution that's connected to indoor cooking, predominantly using firewood and charcoal. And many of those deaths, if not just about all of those deaths, are avoidable deaths. These are unnecessary deaths that are caused by the economic conditions that make people in rural areas, particularly both in Asia and in Africa and in Latin America, reliant on wood and charcoal as the only technological option to meet their daily cooking needs. So this is why we really, in the report, we argue that we need something, we need a more profound transformation in the cooking sector to get out of that trap and help people in those regions around the world to make that transition and to be able to afford the technologies that are necessary to bridge that gap. So what are the alternatives? The report looks at 4 different alternatives. We recognize that these are not exhaustive, and we could have touched on a few other options. We settled on these 4 because they covered a spectrum of the available options that was seen to be reflective of the current state of technologies, and also because it touched on both electric pathways as well as gas-based or biogas-based pathways. So the 4 that we cover are the use of individual solar home systems to power electric cooking. So what would that look like and how much would that cost? Renewably powered mini-grids. And then we look at the feasibility of that and how much that pathway would cost, both for individual households as well as for communities. The third is we examine the current cost competitiveness and scalability of biogas systems, which can be used essentially gathering waste from the surrounding environment, either human or agricultural, and to produce methane that can be directly piped into a traditional gas burner. And the fourth is related, but uses different technology based on power to gas. So this is essentially using electricity combined with a carbon feedstock in order to produce synthetic methane. So essentially a form of liquefied petroleum gas that can be produced with renewable electricity. So we look at that as a pathway that could essentially replace or substitute for LPG in markets where LPG is not available, and it could potentially, with the right combination of investments and supports, provide a cost-effective alternative to cooking in certain regions. So here's a quick snapshot of the cost ranges that we come to after running individual analyses of each of the different technologies. This covers essentially the costs under the most optimistic scenarios as well as the most pessimistic scenarios for each of the different technologies. And you get a sense on the left of where the wood options are. The decreasing bars are a function of the improved efficiency of the stove used. So if you have a more efficient stove, you need to burn less, which means you need to spend less on fuel. So the cost in euro per person per day is reduced. And for the gas options in the middle, and then the 2 on the right are the solar home systems as well as the mini-grid pathways. I'll skip over this. This is included in the slides and you can consult it afterwards. It essentially just provides us an idea of the approximate energy intensity of different kinds of meals that are commonly cooked in countries around the world. And roughly how many, on the right axis, how many kilowatt hours they use, and on the left axis, how many megajoules of energy input. Naturally, the report recognizes that different regions will need different solutions. So in urban regions, we may see the transition to electrification, to electric cooking much more quickly. In peri-urban regions, that we may need a different set of solutions, and then the same for rural and remote regions. And the report focuses primarily on peri-urban as well as remote regions, given that that's where where the dependence on traditional firewood and charcoal is the highest. A couple key concepts before wrapping up that I think are really important in this debate is the displacement rate and the reversion risk. So let me just describe quickly what we mean by the displacement rate. Based on analyses that have been done by the World Bank and others, the displacement rate refers to the actual rate at which new cooking technologies reduce firewood or charcoal consumption. So they've done analyses looking at villages using biogas technologies as well as using solar or electric cooking technologies, and they compare the impact on actual usage. So how much does it actually reduce the household consumption of those fuels? And what was surprising from this, at least as we were diving in and doing the analysis, is that biogas has a far higher displacement rate than electric options. So households that were provided or that developed a biogas system were replacing from 66 to 80% of their total firewood or charcoal needs. So they were cooking predominantly with biogas. It wasn't just a partial substitute, it was largely replacing their traditional reliance. They were still using firewood and charcoal for some meals, but the displacement rate there is significant. For PV, we found a much lower displacement rate of between 10 and 40%, which suggests that households were not using solar as much to displace as many of their different daily cooking needs. Part of that could be behavioral and preferences. Part of that could just be familiarity or unfamiliarity with the technology. But so far, that I think is a significant, and we found was a significant finding of the analysis, and one that's relevant very relevant for policymakers and for investment in the cooking sector. I'll move on because we're running out of time. So a few concluding remarks. Transforming the cooking sector is going to be one of the great challenges of the 21st century. We're going to need to do something serious about cooking partly to make progress on tackling climate change, because the cooking sector is a major driver of emissions in many countries of the world. And if you combine it with deforestation and some of the issues in the forestry sector, this really underscores how critical the cooking sector is and remains and needs to remain on the policy agenda. And we're going to need new technologies and new business models. And this report tries to provide a snapshot and evaluation of what technologies, what the current cost landscape is for those technologies. Two final points. There's some low-hanging fruit. It's often talked about to reform fossil fuel subsidies. I think there are a few sectors in which this is more compelling and more clear than in the cooking sector. Fossil fuel subsidies predominantly support middle and upper income citizens, not lower income citizens. In other words, the bulk of the subsidies go to wealthier households. With the cooking sector, the subsidies by definition are targeting predominantly rural and low-income residents. So in terms of social equity and justice, fundamentally, there's a really strong argument to reform fossil fuel subsidies in favor of cleaner cooking technologies. And finally, global climate finance should see the cooking sector as a much greater priority in the years ahead. So with that, I'll close off and we can open up to questions. Thank you all for your attention.
Toby, thank you very much. And I would actually like to pose the one question to you directly, which is very specifically on the role of LPG stoves, as you were just explaining about the solution for renewable energy to use for cooking stoves. So the question is, what role of LPG stoves do you see in switching from biomass to cooking as efficient means compared to renewable energy cooking sources? Can you mention that?
A great question. I think the role of LPG is being rolled out in many markets, many jurisdictions across Africa as well as across Asia and Latin America. So we've seen significant inroads in countries in Latin America. In Asia, in many countries, that's been the dominant transition fuel. So that's how governments have been focusing, prioritizing, transitioning away from traditional firewood. So LPG in the near term arguably definitely has a major role to play and can significantly help reduce emissions, significantly protect forest habitat and reduce deforestation, and all of those co-benefits are also manifested in the health benefits. So the LPG stoves burn much more cleanly and don't produce nearly as many emissions, harmful emissions, as firewood or charcoal do. So I think there's no getting around the LPG question as arguably as a transition fuel. I think the report comes to the conclusion that while LPG could be and can be a very powerful transition fuel, it too is not a long-term sustainable solution for the simple reason that it's not renewable. So to the extent that LPG is coming from essentially from oil, it's a byproduct of oil refining, in the long term we are going to also need to transition away from LPG. So it can have a role and has in many countries a very important role to play in helping get communities off firewood and charcoal. But in the long term, we're also going to need to think about transitioning even beyond it. And that's one of the reasons why we actually looked at power to gas in the report, because it can actually be produced using renewable electricity. And that then provides a way for LPG to become, or for gas-based fuels to also become renewable and therefore sustainable. So that's essentially the conclusion that we come to in the report.
Thank you very much. There are much more questions on that. I'll probably first go back to Morocco, because there are also even more questions on Morocco. Irene, there are some questions around what are the proposed renewable energy mix for a 100% renewable energy scenario in Morocco? What is the definition of so-called small and medium-sized projects, and what would you advise more densely populated countries like Uganda, for example, how can they achieve 100% renewables, as Morocco is very has a lot of land? So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the points on that.
Thank you very much. Regarding the first question on the technicality, on the World Future Council, from our side, we've been focusing on the legal framework and the policy elements which could be needed to enable this the investments and the active participation of all stakeholders to go 100% renewable energy, and particularly a key focus has been made on the need to pursue decentralized renewable energy system, and not only large-scale projects, especially in countries such as Morocco, which is very endowed with natural resources. But there are other actors right now, such as GIZ and German Watch, who are already looking into this technicality and the percentage of each renewable energy mix to ensure that a country achieves 100% renewable energy, and this will be shortly published, if not by the end of this year, in the first term of 2017. When I was talking about small and medium-sized renewable energy projects, I meant the involvement of households, of the communities, of the small enterprises, and of local authorities who want to pursue renewable energy projects and to inject renewable energy into the grid. And regarding the last question, and how can countries such as Uganda, who is more limited on land, go to 100% renewable energy, we say that is not only, and this is what we are also advocating in Morocco, it's not only about large-scale projects such as CSP, who are going to make a country go 100% renewable energy, but rather to look into the natural resources each country has, and how can you exploit them all, and especially how to integrate the renewable energy production from all these sources. And we see countries very densely populated with no much land, such as Germany, which is we're more than 165 regions already pursuing 100% renewable energy. And here is key to make sure that the land and the value created through this land exploitation for renewable energy sources reverts back into the community, and that the community is engaged to avoid this conflicts of land use, where it's just a big company exploiting the land and for renewable energy production, but the benefits do not stay in the area.
Thank you very much. I hope that answered some of your questions, people. I think Sixbert has some troubles with internet or connecting. Sixbert, do you hear us? There are some questions that I would like to direct to you, but I'm not sure if you can talk to us. Okay, I think it's an internet connection issue with Tanzania at the moment. So I would continue back to Toby actually. There is the question of solar thermal cookers. So where do you see the role of solar thermal cookers as a technology? And secondly, and maybe you can kind of elaborate on that a little bit more. The four alternatives that you already elaborated on, some people say they're still out of reach for rural people or for people living in rural areas, mainly due to technological and social economic factors. So what would be your advice? What can be done to accelerate the use of these alternatives?
So quickly on the, both good questions. Quickly on the solar thermal cookers. I'm guessing you're referring to the sort of parabolic lenses or different kinds of solar ovens that are common and have been piloted in many different countries. There are a lot of off-the-shelf products now. You can also make your own solar cooker. These have been successful in certain regions in targeting very specific cooking needs, but they do not, in most cases, substitute for actual, for a significant part of actual cooking needs, for the simple reason that most people don't cook in the middle of the day when the sun is hottest. Cooking is predominantly done in the early hours in the morning as well as in the evenings or early evenings. And that's not when the solar cookers are at their able to meet the need most optimally. So they remain, and I think are likely to remain, a bit of a niche product. I think an important component for certain segments of the market and for certain specific cooking needs. For example, anything bread or baking related that can be done in an oven for a little shop that needs to produce to sell, for example, bread or different types of cakes or small cookies or things like that, as is done in many rural parts of across developing countries. There may be a targeted role for cooking in that sense, but it's unlikely to substitute in a significant way for full spectrum cooking needs, to put it that way. There are also some innovations, just to pick up on that question and go a little bit further, there are some innovations looking at community-based solar storage, so where you could have essentially thermal, a form of hot water or even a hot fluid that could be stored essentially in the earth and could be tapped into essentially to supply cooking needs. So you could get boiling or near boiling water from a type of large storage unit. There have been some pilot projects on that, but again, whether that becomes cost competitive, it remains to be seen. So now moving to the second one about affordability. It remains one of the biggest challenges for the cooking sector, is that the majority of the cooking needs that need most urgently to be transitioned away from firewood and charcoal are in regions where income levels are lowest. And that underscores, it makes it more difficult for new business models to provide products in the cooking sector because income levels are so low, and people often would prioritize other things with the scarce income they have. So rather than spending 40 cents a kilowatt hour on an electric cooking to cook a meal, people are much more likely to use that scarce money on other things than cooking, and continue to cook with their existing technology. So even if income levels rise, it's not guaranteed that people will automatically start using electric cooking, because there may be other uses of that money that take precedence. So that's one issue. On a more optimistic note, however, if you look at the chart of costs, you can actually see that both for LPG or for power to gas as well as biogas, they are fully cost competitive currently with wood and charcoal. So if you look at that segment of the market, focusing on those two, those are very immediate, affordable, cost-effective options to substitute cooking meats. And I think the biggest challenge there is, again, financing the upfront costs. So how do we do that? There are a number of new business models emerging that allow people to finance, for example, small solar systems using a pay-as-you-go structure. So they pay a small amount per day or per month to finance the high upfront cost of the system. The same is being rolled out for certain bioenergy technologies like pellets and briquettes, and the same could be rolled out for biogas systems, where essentially you would finance the biogas system, install it, and then users would pay it in small payments over time. And I think given how biogas in particular can substitute for a significant share of cooking needs, as we saw previously, I think that's a very attractive and viable pathway that needs a lot more attention and a lot more focus and a lot more NGOs and companies and entrepreneurs working in to help scale up. So I think the financial challenges and economic challenges are real, but we come to the conclusion in the report that there are very specific ways and concrete ways in which those can be overcome, and in many markets already are being overcome. So what we need is to take what works and start scaling it up.
Thank you so much, Toby, and thank you for highlighting also the role of entrepreneurs in that, as I saw some of the questions directed to several people about the role of SMEs and entrepreneurs and developing local industries. So, Sixbert, are you there? Can you hear me? And can you speak to us? I would have one question to you. Is this working, Sixbert? No, apparently not. Okay, that is very much a shame because then we can't learn more about Tanzania in this particular format at the moment. But I would like to encourage you all to get in touch with the speakers via their Twitter handle, via their email addresses, which you can all find on their website, and also on the slides that Joanna has already kindly uploaded. So you find all the contact details, you find all the speakers also on LinkedIn, so feel free to engage with them to learn more about all their insights and projects that they are involved in, and ask all these amazing questions that I now can't take up in this particular space, but there are actually really informative questions about very particular technicalities, and I'm sure you will get answers from them bilaterally or in future meetings. So with this, I would like to close that. We are already 5 minutes over time, but I see there's still so many people joining us, so that means that it has been informative for you, and it has been worth spending your time with us, which is a big honor in these busy schedules of people. So thank you so much for joining. Thanks for engaging, for posing your questions. Feel free to get in touch with any of us. And thank you for Joanna and the team, and to the ICES International Solar Energy Society for hosting us and giving us the space for sharing this knowledge.
Thank you, and thank you to all our panelist speakers for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today, and thank you very, very much, Anna, for organising and for moderating. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you to so many of you who have stayed till the very last minute. It was a very inspiring session, and I hope you all enjoyed it too. As Anna said, to contact the panelist speakers for further information, please see their own contact information in their presentations available to download on our website. That's ises.org. The next ICES webinar will take place on the 8th of December and will focus on PV market development. So I welcome you all to join me again for another ISIS webinar. For more information, please visit our website. If you use social media, we encourage you to connect with us to continue the discussion, as Anna has said, and to continue to stay in touch to the global status of renewables and especially renewables in developing countries. Last but not least, thank you very, very much to our audience for joining us today and for your dynamic participation in posing your questions. We look forward to welcoming you at another ISIS webinar. Please do use the hashtag which Anna has shown you at the beginning of the webinar. That's hashtag Go100RE. You may view the webinar recording in a couple of hours on our website. Please check the website and the YouTube channel for this recording. And as mentioned before, members of the International Solar Energy Society, you can log into your account and watch all the webinars and the recordings and the presentations in the members area. If you have comments or feedback, we welcome you to share this with us so that we can continue to improve our webinar series for you. Please participate in the survey or send your feedback to public.relations@isis.org. I'm going to wrap up. That's all we have time for today. Thank you for joining us. Wishing you all a lovely start to the day, evening or afternoon, whatever time it is in your part of the world, and hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.